Hello, and welcome to the final installment in this training module series, Module 09. In this final module, we will simultaneously feature the last vehicle present in the simulator, while also doing final unit comparison and evaluation of all the featured units. So let's get into things. The point of this module is outright to give you, once again, perspective. Perspective on the other most advanced second-generation AUGs and its line of evolution, the brutal crab. Right now, at this very instant, inside every single Abrams tank, sits the Honeywell AGT-1500 power plant. For most of the existence of tanks, they got their power from piston engines, either radial or inline. For a very long time, extremely fast armored vehicles like the M18 Hellcat and modern Leopard 2 used powerful piston engines to push speeds into the 60 to 90 km per hour range. But then the turbine revolution happened. The M1 Abrams AGT-1500 is an example of this. Not a piston, but instead a turbine engine. This powerful engine means the tank actually has a limiting governor capping its top speed down to around 70 km per hour. But ungoverned, the Abrams can easily hit 100 km per hour in the right conditions. Now, as we mentioned earlier in this series, the Type 12 and VW1's development saw the creation of incredibly compact and powerful turbine engine plants. So the simple question posed by the tank engineers was this: what if we were to take that kind of power and implant it into a tank? What if we could combine the best parts of the tank, quad-legged AUGs, and that powerful, capable turbine output? The result: the M19A1 AUGs, the brutal crab. Whereas the Gungriffon sought to create a new niche of military vehicle with a combination of technologies, the brutal crab here seeks to take the armored vehicles like tanks to the next level. The brutal crab laughs in the face of those old speed records. Its straight-line acceleration can hit speeds of over 180 km per hour. That's right, it is the world's fastest armored vehicle, faster than any tank or second-generation AUGs on the ground. Its segmented and elevated body allows for adjustable elevation, while being less vulnerable to anti-vehicular mines. Its entire thorax is packed with a supercharged power plant, twice the size and power of the AGT-1500s, if not more, all without compromising armor by retaining the advanced ceramic composites, reactive armor, and various CHOBM abilities of the Abrams pioneered. This makes a vehicle which is a whirlwind of frontal attack or flanking power, a high-speed anti-armor super MBT and tank destroyer. And do not forget to use this to quickly resupply at helicopters as well. The first and most obvious thing is that this is not a flight-capable machine or unit. The brutal crab is completely honed in around its blitz attack ground unit role. Notice as well this machine has no turret mechanism, only vertical gun elevation. But now notice as well the single best ability of this machine, the thing that sets it apart from any traditional MBT. It can strafe, and not only that, its transmission is 360-degree capable. What this effectively means is it can drift in just about any direction, while its main weapon and frontal armor face are always on target. WASD directionally strafe the machine around, with the mouse controlling central aim. This effectively means the brutal crab can always present its best armor to enemies while retreating or advancing, strafing and drifting left to right, etc. Here the brutal crab shares some similarity with the Apache. The ideal movement does not directly shift left to right, as this makes the vehicle vulnerable to enemy fire, but actively circles and winds its way to avoid fire. Use slow curving adjustments to stay on target, or big winding circles to adjust heading. Now here, slopes provide a key challenge. The same slopes would pose an almost impassable danger to any modern tanks. Yet here, the brutal crab can activate a speed boost to rapidly get some momentum to crest that hill. However, some slopes are still too steep, which we will get into later. Helpful tip: while at rest, rapidly tap any of the WASD keys twice to activate that rapid boost. So here, the legs, super turbine, and raw power mean the brutal crab can beat just about most terrain, all while still targeting enemy units. But wait, what is this? That's right, The Brutal Crab has the widest array of available weapon payload of any vehicle in the simulator. When a vehicle does not need to worry about flying through the air, it gains a lot of leeway to bear arms. As you can see, they are clumped into clusters of left and right arrangement. Using your primary turret rotation key, you fire the right. Using your mouse left fire button, you fire the left. We will go through them here. Gun and AC-130. The first weapons. The same rapid-fire, auto-loading Type 12 cannon from the Gungriffon program has here been adapted for the Crab. But note its limited ammo. It is not the only weapon this vehicle has, merely its punchiest projectile weapon. Save its use for truly dangerous enemies. An important note as well. As you cannot do top-down attack, like the Gungriffons or the Jagd, you must hammer the horizontal armor of enemies instead, meaning more shots. Keep this in mind. The other weapon in this pair is the AC-130. Yes, that is right. You launch a target designating smoke signal, and a few seconds later a waiting AC-130 gunship will launch an earth-shattering attack. You have only a few of these, so it's best to save them for any enemy formations. And as always, do not get too close to this blast. 20mm and 45mm. This Crab has some nasty claws. These are in some way your true best primary weapons. A left-mounted 20mm Vulcan can spray down any targets with a hail of shells. This is backed up by a uniquely powerful 45mm autocannon, which whumps down any enemy armor. These weapons have plentiful ammo, but be careful, they overheat. And at different rates, so keep an eye on your heat gauges. As well, their projectile speed is slightly different, with the 45mm having a lower muzzle velocity. This causes a different firing angle as well. Keep this in mind when lining up targets. ATM and smoke. Your missile weapon complement is the ATM. Now, do not be confused, this is not a self-guiding missile like the infrared guidance of the Type 12s. The Brutal Crab instead mounts a massive SAR missile launcher. This means you must continually illuminate the target as the missile spirals in. Now this may seem inferior to the ATM, as it is slower, cannot target aircraft effectively, and needs guidance, right? Wrong. As it is SAR, semi-active radar homing, this missile can be used to completely circumvent smoke. It's immune to flares and chaff as well. This means you can use this to swat otherwise immune flare-launching targets at range. And as well, its warhead is larger, meaning it can one-shot targets ATM could not. And speaking of smoke, the Brutal Crab can launch and use this IR smokescreen to cover its retreat, or protect allies from missile attacks. Make good use of it. Radar. Finally, the classic radar is here present again. But notice how limited its range is, and how easily blocked by terrain it is as well. This leads to the other unique feature of this module. You are not alone. Like any armored tank platoon, you will very often be accompanied by anywhere from 1 to 3 other Brutal Crabs, sometimes even 4. These units are under your command. Now you could use data link, but you do not have to. Holding the previous boost key now opens the command box. These commands only apply to Brutal Crabs. Mouse towards a direction to quickly select a command. Go attack signals to go out to a point and attack the nearest enemies, or those in target view. Go forward directs them to the same point, but under simply a move here command. Stop tells them to stop. Finally, the last bottom command tells them to form into either a line abreast formation, fingertips formation, chevron, or echelon formation diagonally. Important note. As many Brutal Crabs fire and move together, be wary of friendly fire and try not to hit allies. This can be incredibly difficult given the high-speed nature of the Brutal Crabs in general. As always, smartly commanding and fighting alongside your units is vital to victory. These units can nicely mop up any enemies you do not need to. And another important note. If you should need to give them a patrol elsewhere, data link is always available to tell them to do so. However, should you give them a direct command, that trumps any data link command. Use this to your advantage. So putting this all together, you should see an image of a truly devastating whirlwind attacker, packed full of multiple weapons capable of neutralizing just about most threats. This machine is a fearsome combatant whose combined speed and strafing means it can also be almost annoyingly impossible to land hits on. It can more than capably perform hit and run. But note the obvious trade-offs as well. This machine is fast as hell on the ground, but in the air, helicopters, Gungriffons, and so on are still much faster. Important note: VW-1s and Jagdpanther can absolutely annihilate you if they jump up and in front of you. You must keep spacing. Distance yourself and engage from a good buffer of room to hit them. As you cannot take to the skies, your sensors are also always going to be inferior. You have to compensate. Like all tanks and armored vehicles with sharp spatial awareness, you can somewhat get by. You will direly miss the days of the taller, elevated sensors on the Gungriffons, the UAVs of the CCV module, or the longbow radar of the Apache. Likewise, you must always engage enemies from the ground, leaving you vulnerable to air attack as you cannot elevate as easily, and not able to take advantage of simply leaping into the air to avoid attack, or leaping into the air to maximize your damage. The Brutal Crab is the master of pure two-dimensional land combat, but it also has to accept the limitations of the land combatant as well. You will sorely miss the boost ability. Then perhaps the most important lesson: the more constrained the Brutal Crab is, the worse its abilities get, such as terrain becomes too vertical for it to climb, and unfortunately in some missions this critical flaw truly hurts it to the worst. Important note: unlike the AI-controlled Brutal Crabs, the piloted Brutal Crab cannot use walk mode, thus some slopes are effectively impassable. This is a limitation of the simulation, imparted mainly because it was designed by default for the Gungriffons and not the Brutal Crab. Now on to the missions. Stretch your legs in Mission 1 and try out the wide buffet of weapons the Brutal Crab has. Test out its speed boost to climb hills, or how its missiles behave. Try out the Brutal Crab's commands to position allies. This mission is a cakewalk and here for you to really play around. Here, this is exactly what the Brutal Crab excels at: a giant open maneuverable space filled with targets. The Brutal Crab can quite frankly go to town, as this is the ideal mission type for its abilities and role. An unrestricted frontal assault where its combined speed and weapons fit perfectly. Sail between the trees and across the farmers' fields as you tear apart enemy tanks, AUGs, trucks, and so on, using your strafe and speed to never give them a second to think, let alone react. This is perhaps the best vehicle to approach this mission with. Mission 3, though, is sorely the opposite. With no boost and limited sensors, the Brutal Crab, like many MBTs and tanks in general, suffers horribly in urban combat. Isolated and with no infantry support or UAV, the Brutal Crab must painstakingly take each street nervously, bit by bit, prodding out targets and maneuvering around the area cautiously. Whereas the Type 12, VW-1 or YAG can leap into the air and rain hell, here the Brutal Crab must deal with these conditions flatly. And that same clutter makes the Brutal Crab's speed almost useless for how much it helps in these tight margins. This crab is in a trap. Mission 4 here is thankfully a return to more ideal circumstances. Here the crab's speed and weapons do well to counter the gross number of heavy armor in the woods. As it is not aerial, it can safely approach the swaths of AAA and hit them hard using its AC-130, ATM, gun, and so on. As well, the map's relative length is less felt when casually traversing at high speeds of the crab. You can quickly and efficiently sweep up and down the map quite well. Here, once more, the mobility and freedom of movement granted from this machine's strafe and circle, hit and run, and general speed abilities thin out the base until every enemy is destroyed. After which, you can clear out the incoming patrols. Once more, the rapid speed of the crab makes it perfect for annihilating the lone groups of enemies approaching the base. Mission 6 is where the limitations of the machine start to really kick in. The fact you cannot boost into the air means you have to be wary of charging into large groups of enemies. This starts as an issue as of this mission. First off, pull your RFVs back and choose instead to flank across one of the artillery hills, then destroy the train. This is similar to the Type 12's approach, but here, Instead of sweeping down and wiping out the various armored units on the other hill, take out the AUGs in the valley first. Secure the area around your CCV and neutralize the roller AUGs and AAA formation that approaches from a safe distance. After this is all done, and you have removed the remaining attackers, let the CCV leave the map, or wipe out the other artillery hills units to end the mission. This is the first real test of your abilities. As per usual, command allies into a chevron. From here, you must use the speed and power of the Brutal Crab responsively to maneuver and combat incoming enemy waves as they appear. Use hit-and-run tactics. Maintain distance and try to flank and hit enemy formations from the rear when possible. When the enemy Brutal Crabs show up, this is your real test. See just how good you are and who the master of the machine is. Finally, at the end, with the extreme caution, engage and destroy the enemy VW-1s, as they will not go easily. Never let them close the gap, and always keep pouring on fire. Mission 8's greatest hazard is a combination of geography and the AAA formations. The Crabs simply cannot easily navigate the whole area like the Type 12s could. The large hill that was once a great advantage to the Type 12 is your weakness. What is worse is the far end of the map cannot be safely used to maneuver around because the enemy Tunguskas must be taken out first. With all that in mind, this mission is still manageable thanks to the Brutal Crab's speed, and the allied Brutal Crabs present with you. Distribute your allies to the 3 supply routes, and you yourself make good use of the Crab's speed to respond as needed. Here is the Crab's worst weaknesses all in one, in perhaps one of the hardest matchups of machine to mission in the simulator. Mission 9 for the Crab is like Mission 11 for the Apache, or Mission 8 for the VW-1. It is a concentrated hell. First off, the terrain has several impassable slopes. The early valley alone cannot be effectively climbed with ease. That means you must endure the gauntlet of the 2 roller squads, or be ready to absolutely annihilate them as soon as possible. Make use of your allies to clear out some areas ahead. What makes things worse is the hidden AAA nested between the buildings near the first landing site for the helicopter. The Crab's lower profile and lack of boost means it cannot effectively engage these targets from far out, or as fast as the Gungriffons. Finally, beware the lower valley at the other end of the map. Falling into it means you could be permanently separated from the convoy and fail to protect them. Speaking of which, the convoy's timeline must be abided, and this really is the final noose around the Crab's neck. Only with multiple attempts and some luck will you live past the Jagdpanther's assault. Once more, important note, this is one of the top hardest missions in the sim, flat out. Do not be discouraged if you should fail many times at first, because it is possible. In an inversion from the typical state of affairs, Mission 10 is much more easier for the Crab. This is unsurprisingly thanks to the open nature of the movement and the simple defensive wave-based attacks when combined with the Crab's speed. You have a good amount of both time, speed, and weapons to destroy the various specific waves. Helpful tip: remember your smoke launcher. Laying down a smokescreen around allies can help them out if the enemy Crabs attack. Only the final runway attack bears particular challenge, and if you are targeting well and stay sharp, you can handily deal with all of the Jagdpanther there. The final mission. Here you will want to repeat Mission 7's approach. Form up allies into an offensive chevron. Send your friendly Crabs over to help the Southern Valley's defense. Then use the free cast strike to remove the first group, proceeding to destroy the secondary group in the Northern Valley as well. Now quickly use the Crab's speed to then shift south, letting the enemy formations come to you while you whittle them down bit by bit. If done right, they should pose no real threat. Go resupply at the helicopter and shift everyone north. Then, as in every other version of this mission, brace for the final onslaught of enemy Crabs, Apaches, and VW-1s. Take them out and fire away. And so now we come to the final section of the final video. It has been a long journey. 66 missions in total amongst the 6 vehicles. Congratulations. If you have beaten all of these missions, you are a certified AUGS pilot beyond simply the Type 12. Here the units will be evaluated on 6 criteria in particular. Air mobility and sensors, how mobile the unit is as well as its sensor range and ability. Ground mobility, its ground traversal speed and ability to surmount slopes. Durability, its armor values and damage resistance. Resupply ability, how well it can resupply itself in battle. Damage, how quickly it can put out damage on enemy targets. And lastly, endurance, how long the vehicle's ammunition and fuel allow it to stay operational to the best of its abilities on the battlefield. For obvious reasons, the Type 82 will be omitted from this list, as it is not a frontline combatant or AUGS, and is a command vehicle. So let's go through the unit comparison and its final implications. Brutal Crab. The American M19A1 is a superb advancement of the tank. It incorporates all the best developments in technology from the second generation AUGS. That being said, it's a strong point as a superb quad-leg AUGS and tank still have their downsides. The Brutal Crab excels when it has room to clear areas to maximize its speed and attacking abilities. In dense terrain, in cities, and so on, it fares very poorly, not unlike traditional tanks. When it is in its element, when it can use teamwork to overwhelm and swarm enemies though, it is a great threat. This should prove that even with super tech, tanks are not effective replacements for a Gungriffon. It receives an S in ground mobility and armor, and it provides decent resupply ability and good damage, but receives an obvious D in sensors and has no real mobility. Jagd Panther. The Germans have created a super contender for the Gungriffon program in every way. The Jagd's 9 miraculous engine advancements alone make its mobility top of the line. Its long strafe combined with its ability to not require specialized fuel or sacrifice sensors is an engineering feat that has truly leveraged the best concepts of the second generation AUGS, the Gungriffon approach, and gone even further. However, its higher time to kill is not a serious point when considering its plethora of ammo or the fact its singular twin Gatlings make short work of a majority of targets, and for all else it packs the missiles and rockets needed. It receives 2 well-deserved S ranks in air mobility and endurance. Only its lower than average ground mobility and relatively lighter armor are minor issues, but still present. Its speed and range let it resupply capably. Overall, a true Wanderwunder. Apache. This unit acts as a good representative of extant systems. Its huge missile payload and flying sensor abilities are phenomenally matched. But as much support as it can give, it is ultimately an aerial vehicle, not the adaptive chameleon that is the Gungriffon. Its inability to reload and refuel mid-battle as well hampers it here, and its general vulnerability to air defenses and damage makes it less tough and more cautious. If the Brutal Crab highlights an all-ground approach's weakness, the Apache here highlights that a traditional all-air approach also does not truly replace the Gungriffon. Its approach is here reflected in 2 S ranks in its strengths, and poor scores in the comparative areas of weakness. VW-1. The American Gungriffon here is very bluntly been specialized for its blitz attacker role. Its combined arms interdependencies make it simultaneously more focused and lethal, but also more helpless when isolated. It's the byproduct of the second generation AUGS Gungriffon concept being focused into the American military-industrial complex's requirements. A larger possibility still exists for improvements to push it past these weaknesses though. But none of these flaws are fatal, merely those an obvious trade-off can bring. When combined with the Brutal Crab, its assaults are devastatingly good. It receives 5 A's, and it truly is only held back by a fuel dependency and lack of internal long-range sensors. Type 12. And finally, we return to the first vehicle. The JSDF has solidified a well-rounded and adaptable machine. In many ways, the Type 12 Gungriffon is the baseline here. A platform that retains a large cannon, but is not terrain limited like a tank. A platform that can take to the air and do brutal downwards fire without staying there to the point of vulnerability like a helicopter. Its well-rounded approach is reflected in 3 A's for endurance, resupply, and damage, 2 respectable B's in general mobility, and an S in survivability. A machine ready for anything. The Gungriffon is the unit between the heavens and the earth. And with units going into production right now, its time has only just begun. With that, this series of HIMAX Simulator walkthrough training modules is complete. Get out there. It's time to do or ride.